Okay, let me show you now how you can use the Texas Instruments calculator to calculate relative frequency. Now, yeah, the example that I'm going to give you is short, and you could do it, to calculate relative frequency without using these special functions here in your calculator. But the list editor is going to become extremely important to you later when you're putting in more data values and you need to work with it. Uh, so this is a really easy example to introduce the list editor to you so that you start to learn how it functions and you learn how to use it optimally. Okay. So the last example that we looked at was an example of a frequency table with hair color. I believe we had black, blonde, and brown. And we had values of 15, 14, and 21 respectively for those different hair colors. So let me show you how we're going to use the Texas Instruments calculator to calculate relative frequency. So I'm going to be following these instructions from your lecture notes, but I'm going to flip over to a calculator emulator here to do it. So this emulator is a little weird. It does have, the screen here off to the left and the keypad here on the right, but that's just the way it is. So what you want to do is go ahead and turn your calculator on. And to get to the list editor, what you want to do is you want to hit the stat button, okay, which is this button right here that says stat, just to the left of the left arrow key. So if I click that, you can see up here on your screen should change where it's got an edit menu, a calc menu, and a tests menu. And so right now this edit menu is selected. So if I hit the right arrow key, it goes to calc. If I hit the right arrow key again, it goes to the tests menu. So you can see it gives me a whole bunch of different options when I switch between these different menus. But what we want is we want this edit menu, and we want this first option, which is edit, which is going to have us edit lists. So, at this point, if I were to move the cursor up and down, I can change which option I want, but I want this first one. So now I'm going to hit the enter button, which is the button here in the lower right-hand corner. And this brings me to the list editor. So you'll notice that this looks like a spreadsheet where you've got columns and you've got rows, and the columns have what's called a column heading. So you can see here, this column heading says L1. This one says L2, L3, L4, L5. And so these are your lists. There should be one more, L6. Yeah. So these are your lists that you're going to put data into. And notice that L1, L2, L3, L4, L5, and L6 correspond to those same labels on your calculator keypad. So above the number 1 button, it says L1 in blue. Above the 2 button, it says L2 in blue. Above the 3 button, it says L3, L4, L5, and L6. That's so you can use these lists. You can refer to these lists and use them to do calculations. Okay. And because, this L1 is highlighted in blue, you would hit this blue second button in conjunction with the number 1 button. So you hit this first, you hit this second, and it'll print L1. Okay. But we'll get to that. Right now, we're looking at the list editor with absolutely nothing in it. Now, if you're using a calculator that's been used before, maybe it has data already here, something like this, and you want to be able to clear it out, then what you want to do is you want to navigate to the top of the column heading. So you want to make sure that list 1 or list 2, 3, or 4, or 5, 6 is selected. And notice it's telling you L1 is equal to these things. It's got 6, 3, and 5 in it. If you want to clear that out, do not hit the delete button. Hit the clear button. Notice how those numbers went away. Okay, they're not gone from here yet, but they did disappear down here. So hit the clear button and then hit the enter button. And notice all of those values go away. Okay, so that's how you can clear a list. But let's go ahead and put in our values. So I'm going to put in 15, 14, and 21. Now we have to kind of keep track ourselves as far as, like this deals with black hair, this is blonde hair, and this is brown hair, because there's no way to kind of enter words into this list editor. Okay, so you're going to want to be using this in conjunction with looking at, your work or looking at your lecture notes. Okay, so list one is going to have our list of frequencies, right? This was the frequency of black hair, frequency of blonde hair, frequency of brown hair. Now, what we want to do, and this is where using the list editor is really cool, is we want list two to be composed of our relative frequencies. So what we need to do is we're going to program list two to auto-calculate all of the relative frequencies at once. So remember, the relative frequency, maybe I can switch over to the notes really quick. The relative frequency is equal to the frequency divided by n. And so for us, the frequency is going to be the values in list one. Okay, so let me flip back over to the calculator. So our frequency values are in list one. So what we want to do is we want to program list two. So make sure list two is selected, right? You don't want to have any of these other cells selected. You want to make sure that L2 is selected like this. So on the bottom, it says L2 equals. What we want to do is we want to make it equal to list one divided by n, our sample size, which was 50. All right, so I went kind of quick without explaining what I did. But what I want to do is I want to take list one and divide it by 50. Okay, so how did I get L1 there? Let me clear this. So remember, to get L1 on your keypad, we need to, because L1 is in blue, we need to use two buttons together. We have to use the blue second button first. And notice how the cursor changes to this up arrow, right? If I, let me see here, yeah. So notice that the cursor is just this blinking black square. As soon as I hit the second button, the blinking black square turns into a blinking up arrow. So we hit the blue second button first, then we come down to here and then hit the one key second. And that prints L1 on the screen. And then we can take that and put divided by 50. Now notice it's just sitting here because now in order to actually make this happen, we have to hit the enter button. And when we hit the enter button, watch what happens in list two. Okay, watch what happens. Hit the enter button, and we get 0.3, 0.28, and 0.42. These are the same values that were calculated earlier in your notes. 0.3, 0.28, and 0.42 right here. And so, here in the previous example, I calculated this one at a time, which I was saying you can do, which is actually what I did. You can calculate one at a time, but why do it one at a time when you can just program your calculator to do it all at once for you? You just have to know how to put here in list two, list one divided by 50. So, here we're only looking at 3 rows of data. But what if you had 10 rows of data? What if you had 15 rows of data? Well, instead of doing 15 independent calculations, that would take a lot of time. Why not just do all 15 in one sweep, right? So it's much easier that way. Okay. Um, Another way is, so, what if you didn't even want to add these up, right? Because you remember the sample size is 50. And another way you get the sample size is by summing up this entire column. So maybe how could we do the same thing where we tell the calculator, take L1 and divide it by the sum of L1. Okay. So the sum function, and again, this is in your notes, is we want to go, let's see here. Wonder why. Oh, so what you want to do is you want to go to, yeah, I guess that would work. All right, so second, and then the stat button. So that's going to look at our list functions. Okay, second and stat together will give us our list functions. We're dealing with the list editor. So these are things that we can do to lists. And notice that there are three menus: names, operations, and math. We want the math menu. And notice that there is a function called sum. So if I hit enter on that, so now we can take list one and divide it by the sum of list one. And because we've got a left parentheses here, we've got to put a right parentheses to close that off. And so what this calculator is going to do is it's going to take each of these values and divide it by the sum of list one. So I hit enter. Ah. All right, let's try and figure out what happened here. Quit data error. Shouldn't have done that, but this is instructive. Okay, let's figure out why this happened. Shouldn't have done that. L1 divided by the sum of L1. Ah, okay. I made an error. So can you see the mistake I made? The mistake I made is notice which cell is selected. I didn't select the column header. I selected the row below it. That's why it's giving me this error. So let me go up one to where it says L2, and let me put the same thing in again. So let's put in L1 divided by, okay, to get back to that list menus, the list operations, it's second and stat. Go to the math menu. This is the math that we can do on lists. We want to be able to sum a list. And then let's put L1 in. Right parentheses. If you've got a left parentheses, you got to have a right parentheses to close it off. Now it's going to work. There we go. So we've got 0.3, 0.28, and 0.42, which is what we had here. 0.3, 0.28, and 0.42. Okay. So this was instructive, and I'm glad I made that mistake because it kind of shows you're probably going to make that mistake too. All right. So that is how to use the Texas Instruments calculator in order to calculate relative frequency. Let me know if you have any questions.